If there's one thing Sega knows how to make, it's racing games. Scud Race, Manx TT, Daytona USA. Cabinets for Sega races can still be found in bowling alleys and cinemas across the world. One of their most fondly remembered franchises continues to be Sega Rally. After the first game was released in the arcades, it and its sequels saw ports to a huge number of systems. One of the most interesting was the port of Sega Rally to the Game Boy Advance. It may be a bit disingenuous to call this a port, as it's really its own game in many ways. This is not a direct port of Sega Rally 1 or 2, but rather its own game, trying to evoke the same tense atmosphere and excitement that the franchise had become known for. So, how do you bring a slick, high-powered, arcade racing franchise to the Game Boy Advance? By rebuilding it from the ground up in an engine that exploits as much of the limited power of the handheld hardware as possible.
Easy right, easy left. Whoa. 100, easy right, easy left.
As you can see, Sega Rosso were not entirely successful. Sega Rally on the Game Boy Advance is a somewhat valiant attempt to recreate the style and bright colours of the arcade, but the overall result falls well short of its target. The developers attempted to use pseudo 3D graphics and sprite scaling to try and deliver the same visceral sensations as the original game, but it doesn't quite work. It feels more like an ambitious skin over a superscalar racer like Outrun, rather than a true Sega Rally game. It often devolves graphically into a pixelated mess, made all the more problematic when the action is taking place on the diminutive Game Boy Advance screen. Scenery also has a tendency to pop in quite close to the camera. These issues are manageable on some of the tracks, but some, like the desert, really highlight the gameplay issues that the engine causes. It also runs with a frame rate that is far removed from the exceptionally smooth 60 frames per second of its arcade parent. It's particularly rough when another rally game released around the same time, also for the Game Boy Advance, blows Sega Rally out of the water from a technical perspective. Take a look at V-Rally 3.
3, 2, 1, go!
The game looks cleaner, with less pixelation and a more solid overall appearance. There have been concessions made to achieve this, but they aren't very noticeable on the small screen, and result in a game that feels dramatically easier to play. This is not to say that Sega Rally was a bad game. In fact, on paper, it's an excellent package, featuring a wide variety of cars to drive and 6 tracks to race on. There is a lot of substance here for a handheld racing game. There's also a multiplayer mode if you happen to have all the hardware required. Even the replays from the arcade return, though in an adorably cut down fashion. The sound effects and music also translated fairly well. Engines rumble, tyres squeal, and the music sounds more faithful than you may expect from a cartridge recreation. The best part is that the enthusiastic navigator returns, with voice samples sounding crisp and clear.
100, easy right, maybe.
Unfortunately, all of this goodwill is wasted on a game that's simply too much for the reduced hardware. The technical shortcomings really interfere with the sublime gameplay feeling of the arcade original, making driving feel sluggish and unresponsive in comparison. It's a disappointing outcome for a game that clearly had effort put into it by Sega Rosso. This may all sound tremendously unfair, given the obviously underpowered hardware that Sega Rosso were dealing with, compared to Sega's glorious Model 2 arcade board. However, this brings us to the burning question. Why try to make it this way at all? If trying to emulate the arcade original was always going to be a losing battle, then maybe they could have taken a different approach to the game. Perhaps a game more along the lines of RC Pro-Am, but with Sega Rally's handling and aesthetics, would have been more suitable for the platform. Ironically, one of the mini-games on offer shows the briefest glimpse of what this could have looked like. In any case, this is an interesting and ambitious, but ultimately disappointing, installment in one of Sega's best franchises.